So now we have, now we're going to talk about moderation, and we're going to go through a little bit about what we do, the kinds of stuff that you need to keep an eye out. Remy's going to answer the questions I got from a dev, why my white images don't get passed. Don't upload white images, it's not going to happen. Just don't. And Remy will explain all of it. So Remy is you got a new title now, didn't you?
VP of Care and Safety. I'm also the Chief Privacy Officer for the company.
There we go. I'm like, I know he got a new title, and I forgot what it was. So Remy's going to walk us through moderation and how that impacts all of you. Enjoy.
Right. Thanks, Victoria. Right, so welcome everyone. It's wonderful to see you. I think this is our first ever. I'm actually going to introduce a couple of people. Becky here from Care and Safety, and Tomas as well. Right, so they're here to help. They can bring different perspectives. Becky's been what, 8 years, 10 years? What's your 10? Becky's been with Roblox for 10 years. She knows everything about why did we ever do anything and what was it like back in the day. Tomas has more recently joined, but Tomas comes from Facebook where he worked on privacy. So Tomas has done the big, hardcore, heavy-duty version at Facebook. So we're delighted to have him with us. As we get into this, we're going to tell you a little bit about what we do and try and demystify us. So how many of you before have had an interaction with the mod team in some fashion? Okay. And how many of you walked away from that saying, what was that all about? Okay, but actually no one's hand dropped, right? Maybe some hands went up then too, right? So we're going to try and help you figure some of that out. So I'm Remy Milan, also known as Wind Marshal on the platform. I manage Care and Safety, which includes our customer service and our moderation functions, as well as I mentioned, take care of privacy for the company. So glad to be with you. You know, my own background, like many of you, is started life as a techie, right? So I wrote code. I actually still write code at Roblox. It's not stuff you would see in Lua in the game, but there's machinery in the back end where I write stuff and have deployed things. So I'm active on the tech side as well. But of course, focus most of my attention on making sure things are running smoothly when it comes to moderation and other stuff. So in that context, I want to go through some things very quickly. You can read this faster than I can talk, and we want to get to your Q&A, so we'll jump right into these things. So why do we moderate? Well, it's for safety, right? A lot of the kids who play Roblox are not your age, right? We have a huge group who's under 13. Is there anyone here actually under 13? Nope. No, one? Nope. Nope. Okay, I see someone trolling me. You know, yeah. So when you think about it, right? There's a huge chunk of kids who are 7, 8, 9. The experience of a 7 or 8-year-old is very different from your own, right? It's even hard probably to imagine what it was like to be 7 or 8 at this point in your own lives. We need to make sure that those kids have a safe experience as well, and that for us is a really big deal, and safety drives everything we do in moderation. So start from that perspective. Why do we do what we do? Because we're looking to keep the platform safe, right? So the kinds of things we moderate when you upload content, this is images, video, audio files, 3D meshes, the models. These are things that we're going to look at before the game gets published, right? You're probably familiar with that process. We've worked very hard over the last year to make that a lot faster than it used to be. Right now, we can typically do a moderation task for you on one of these assets in less than 10 minutes on average. We run that 24 hours a day. We will typically do somewhere between 3 to 4 million asset reviews a month, right? So it's a pretty big operation. So when you put your image up there, it's not going to take us necessarily 10 minutes to look at your image, but it'll probably take it 10 minutes to get it into the top of the queue, and then we'll be able to look at it usually pretty quickly, right? So that's really important to us to give you very quick feedback and fast turnaround. Okay, so this is what happens. Just be careful to note that sometimes things can get moderated in-game as well. Things that may be innocent by themselves in combination may not be so innocent. Good example is someone uploads an image and uploads a decal, and the two together are not as innocent as the two separately. So that's why stuff maybe it was okay through looking at it in the moderation upload, but hey, in-game that's not okay. Warnings happen. Don't get too freaked out, right? So you may find you get warned about something. We have typically in any kind of moderation situation, we'll look at who uploaded stuff. If a warning is issued, we're going to look at your history. Warnings are okay generally. We want you to take that as a feedback point to say, hey, I should do something differently. People who get warning after warning after warning and don't seem to change what they're doing are susceptible then to have further things happen to their accounts, like being banned for a few days or ultimately even deleted. That, however, shouldn't happen to you if you make an innocent mistake. If you do something once, you're not going to automatically go into some, deep, dark, you'll never get out of jail again type situation. There are a few exceptions to that, which we'll talk about shortly, but in general, don't worry too much about warnings. There is also an appeals process, so you can ask us what's going on. So think of this as just part of working with us, right? Things that we look for. So I'm going to go through the quick, don't do these things. So bullying and harassment, right? If you upload content that looks like bullying or harassing content, we're definitely not going to be looking at that favorably. By the way, just these examples are all examples people have uploaded, right? Everything you're seeing in these slides, someone tried to upload onto the platform. So these really do happen. They're not made up stuff that we made up just to say, don't do this. Someone actually tried to do this, right? Hate speech is another big one, right? We take this very seriously, right? Hate speech is a big deal right now. If you look at our society, look at societies around the world, hate speech causes lots of issues and is a great source of friction and division in societies. We don't want to see that kind of thing happening on Roblox. So hate speech is one of those areas where we have very little tolerance, and doing things around hate speech is probably a good way to get your account deleted, right? So this is probably one of those areas where there's not so much, hey, I was just making some innocent stuff with hate speech, right? Right? And again, these are types of images people upload, right? Okay. We also look for mental health issues. This one is for us a big deal. It's not so much things that you might be trying to do to other people, but someone expressing things around mental health, around how people are feeling. This is a topic we do look out for. We do have actually some answers which we provide to people for resources and the like. You may, I know this is for us something we always keep a sharp eye out for in terms of looking for people who may need resources or help. We're not trained professionals in diagnosing these situations, but we do look out for this kind of stuff. Sometimes people try and make games. We've seen people saying, hey, I'm going to do a therapy session game. We encourage you not to do that because we recommend people should go get trained professional help for that kind of stuff. So again, this is something we do look for. It's not so much, again, something we think people are doing to other people. It's more people expressing thoughts which we say, hey, this is not really something that is necessarily healthy for that person, and we'll try and do something to help them. Again, these are images. The images you're seeing here are actual uploads that people have uploaded, right? So again, we take this stuff very seriously when people send it in. Okay, tiny text. Right, this one, a lot of times people do, I've got a great race car and I've got all the sponsor logos over it, and the sponsor logos have tiny text which no one can read. Why did my image get moderated? Well, part of the problem is sometimes people put tiny text and stuff and then they blow up, they rescale the image, and the tiny text isn't as innocent as sponsored by Quaker Oil, right? So I have an example here of some hidden tiny text when you look at the real image. Hey, that's, you can't see it, but it's not so friendly when you zoom in on it. So again, tiny text is something which is probably one of the more innocent kind of things we see people do. They don't recognize that we need to be able to read it, or we're looking for people trying to hide things in small pixel sizes and then blowing it up. Because again, we're trying to make sure things stay safe, right? That's kind of why we're doing what we do, right? And then this one is the why don't send us white images, right? So here's an example. This has actually got two violations in it. One of them is it's PII, personally identifiable information. I'm not a celebrity, so uploading my selfie of my own face up onto Roblox is considered personally identifying info. We don't want kids doing that. We don't want 7, 8-year-olds uploading their selfie faces onto Roblox. So in general, we're going to say don't do that. We'll moderate that. Sometimes what people do is they go play with the contrast ratio and contrast ranges in images. So here's an example. I've got the sliders. You can see the histograms on this. The one on the left is me regular. I then compressed it all up into the white region of the image, right? So I turned it from an 8-bit image into something closer to a 3-bit image. It looks white on the screen mostly. You can probably see a little bit of color in there, maybe, depending how good the projector is. And then when I got it in game, I expanded it out. In this case, it's just my smiling face. It may not be my smiling face in other situations. And so when something comes through that looks like a plain white image, that immediately raises questions about what is the plain white image really all about. So you might find that you're trying to do a uniform color, or you're trying to introduce a texture, and you might find someone saying, hey, what is this? And that's why you'll see something like a white image raising flags for us. Right? Okay, so kind of that's the quick version of why we moderate and the kind of way we work and what we're looking for. At this point, I want to open it up to Q&A, because mostly we want to get to your questions, and we want to find out more about what would you like to know, questions you've had, experiences you've had, you want to learn more about. So come on up. Oh, no. We'll let Victoria. All right, right. Okay. Right, yes. Right, okay. Okay.
So my question is, when a mesh or a part gets passed through moderation and you're on team create, is there a way to like fasten that process without someone have to like leave the studio and come back to studio just to see the mesh that got passed through moderation? Like they have to leave the studio just to see it. Yeah, but I don't know if like if that has something to do with moderation. I don't know.
Yeah, Sorkis, you want to? Yeah.
Something we definitely want to fix. Dynamic
Okay.
loading, once the moderation goes through,
Yeah.
see that in the next.
Oh, okay.
Okay, yeah.
In the near future, but we do want to plan. We have plans.
Great.
It's on the
thank
list.
you. Great.
Okay, how come sometimes nearly identical items, one of them will get passed and one of them won't? Like sometimes I have a poster that I want to put up and the English version gets passed but the Spanish version doesn't, or I have an outfit that one version is pink and the other is blue and the pink one doesn't go through.
Right. You know, I would have to look at the specific situation with you. If there's difference in the translation of the languages, if the Spanish version meant something else or had another meaning, that could be a reason why from a language perspective. If it's just a color change, I would have to sit down and we'd have to understand that better. Or if, in that case, you could also do, for the specific thing, do an appeal right to the appeals team and say, hey, you passed the pink one, not the blue, or explain the situation. Yeah. Okay.
I have a question about the recent ban on pills and adrenaline shots, because some games like recent like Oculus Rising and Roblox Hospital games, they use pills to make it more realistic. It's not entirely of a bad thing, pills. It's just used to make a game more realistic.
Yeah, in general, things that are related to drugs or drug paraphernalia are generally things which will raise suspicions, and we don't allow in general references to drugs or drug paraphernalia today. So that's why the problem with pills is what is the context. And an image of pills, we may not know that it's going to be only used in a hospital setting. You could imagine pills being used in a different setting, which is inappropriate. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
We have, in this case, an antidepressant, like a prescription bottle. It's not.
Yeah.
It's a prescription bottle, right? The yellow and white. But then we've got what looks like a vitamin bottle. Would the vitamin bottle be okay in this case, whereas like the prescription bottle would?
Is it would it be clearly and legibly labeled? Okay, that's the problem. Is a bottle of pills is going to be a bottle of pills, and the context, it becomes impossible to tell the context of a bottle of pills, right?
So if I have like a bottle of pills that has like a giant red plus like the health symbol, would that be fine? Or
I would make it more explicit. I would say vitamin D or vitamin C. I wouldn't just put a red X on it, because again, what, is that codeine or is that something else in there, right? Right. If it's just a red X, it's hard. We won't know what the reference would be.
I have another question. Is vitamins okay?
If it's clearly labeled, it should be fine, right? So.
Like we can use the same pill. We can use the same pill, but just add vitamins label.
A white pill by itself is probably not going to be okay, because the problem with just a white pill is what it.
It's not just white. It's just different colors. White, gray.
I would say make sure it's very clearly labeled, unambiguously, like vitamin C in big letters on it, and try,
What about vitamin healing?
Okay, well, I think we're gonna, yeah, I would say if you believe it's innocent and you've made it very clear, if the image or the thing you're uploading is very clearly trying to be innocent and not trying to be, hey, what could this be? Maybe it's something else. Then it should be okay, and then you can always appeal and you can say, look, it said vitamin D on it.
Yeah. I can understand why pills are banned, because kids can make an overdose a game and encourages suicide.
We don't want someone making a suicide.
Yes,
no. When people try and make suicide simulators and kill yourself by drinking bleach, taking pills, we don't want the pills to be used in that context. Yeah. So okay, I'm right. Thanks. Right.
Hi.
Hi.
So I was wondering, what's the capability of the software that the moderation team uses? Do they have settings to play around with the image, like scale, saturation, hue, and all that?
Yeah, I have to be somewhat non-specific about exactly what we do, but we do have some abilities to do that. We do see people trying to game images, which is why I said the white image is something historically people have tried to game. But we do have some capabilities there, but I'm not going to elaborate too further into what we do with images.
Hi. Could you explain a bit how the moderation banning and warnings work? Because sometimes I'll get random bans. Like last week I got a random ban for a decal I made 4 years ago.
Okay.
So I don't really understand how some of those mishaps can happen.
Right. Okay. If it was something that happened from 4 years ago, if it was a decal, it may have been used in a new context, because one of the challenges with decals is they get overlaid on other things. A common quote hack exploit is I make an image, I make a decal, and I make the two look okay by themselves, but you combine them and the decal blocks some letters underneath, right? You can use your imagination. I have the phrase lucky you. And then I make a decal which strategically blocks or changes some of that, and you can imagine a different expression that may emerge when you can combine the decal. If someone did that maybe with your decal and it wound up in a context which was now offensive or was misused, would be a reason why it may have not been moderated 4 years ago, particularly for a decal.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi,
Yeah.
I've been
Hi.
on Roblox for 10 years now. I've
Yeah.
made many front page games over the time, so I consider myself to be pretty successful.
Yes.
But every now and then I'll still get really random moderation incidents happen, and I don't like it. But
Right.
about a year ago, I heard there was talk of maybe longer people that have been on the site without previous moderation history, or people that are just really important to the Roblox as a whole, getting maybe not less moderation, but more generous moderation just from past history and stuff like that.
Yeah, so some of the things we do look at reputation in terms of if someone has not had any recent moderation history, has been a good citizen, if you will, that certainly plays into how we consider moderation activity. We also would like to think about, one of our roadmap areas is to look at reputation as a more formal thing, where we assign people a reputation score, which you can look up, others can see. That's certainly something we would like to introduce to give people a better sense of how they're ranked or how they're viewed. We also do work with DevRel, so for top developers and for other sort of, folks, we do have a different way of looking at their accounts. So yeah, there are some protections in place for for developers that's different than say just a typical player.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, I was gonna say basically the same thing that he said, because
Yeah.
I also been on Roblox for 10 years, and I also noticed that moderation is greatly improved over these 10 years. It used to take a few hours.
Yeah.
for it to get processed, and then now it just takes like minutes.
Yes.
But also, I was wondering about the same thing. Is there gonna be like a verification for like specific users, like especially like top devs, where they can just upload like decals or assets automatically without getting it like without like having someone to go through it? Because
Yeah. We have, I don't know that we'll ever get to a point where we'll have zero review. We may have a different kind of review. We're looking at different ways to make it more streamlined for developers, particularly top devs, or for people who are trusted. Let's say people who have high integrity because they don't violate the rules and don't have warnings. We are interested in making it a better experience for those people and reserving the more onerous stuff for the bad actors who deserve it, who do need that extra attention from us. But thank you for the input, though. I think we do agree with you generally about where we'd like to take it. Yeah.
So I heard you mention the appeals program at some point, like
it's a process.
Sending an email and appealing. How intrinsically versatile is that program? Can you only appeal bans, or can you appeal content deleted?
You can appeal any of the moderation actions. It's part of the moderation team's job, is to take people's disagreements with moderation action and review that.
All right, because my problem is that I run a clothing group. It's a avant-garde clothing group, and we don't really upload what I would consider to be, I don't know, provocative or inappropriate. It's just weird, bizarre stuff. And the problem is that when you upload a clothing decal, you don't really have any context to that. And our stuff, being mostly non sequitur stuff, doesn't intrinsically have any context to it. So I usually upload in batches because it's like usually half my stuff gets content deleted anyways. But what you're saying is that basically if I upload some clothes of mine and it gets deleted for an unspecified reason, I can
You can appeal it. No, you can appeal. Typically on clothing, what we're going to look for is clothing that would be inappropriate. Should a 7 or 8-year-old be looking at that kind of clothing on an avatar or a figure? So, so things that are very risque, or things that are provocative, or things that have sexual innuendo, which might be interesting or appropriate for a 17 or 18-year-old. When we look at it from the context of a 7-year-old, that's going to be typically that'll be typically why a clothing moderation action happens. It'll be viewed as inappropriate for a young child. But you can appeal. You can say, hey, this actually fully clothes the person. It doesn't reveal anything. It's not meant to be, sexual in nature, right? Those will all be grounds for saying, hey, that wasn't appropriate in terms of a decision.
All right. Well, one last thing. Will I get feedback? Because when when something gets content deleted, it's just gone. There's not really any reason.
No, the mods can leave a message for you. The mod system has message capability. They can leave a message and reasoning for you.
So I will get some sort of response feedback in my reply.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
I had a scenario where I uploaded a decal that was in Japanese. It said Tokyo Bike Storage.
Yeah.
And that one got rejected.
Okay.
And then I re-uploaded it, but with the title, "This means Tokyo Bike Storage," and then it got approved.
Okay.
Is that just luck, or is there
Well, a part
something to
of it was someone is trusting that you're providing a correct translation.
Okay.
We don't formally moderate Japanese today. As you heard this morning, we're now doing Spanish, Brazilian, Portuguese, French, German. So if you send something in a different language, we're going to say, okay, we don't formally, moderate Japanese, for example. But given that you provided the translation, we're saying, okay, we will trust.
So there's some reason to it.
There's some reason, and presumably you haven't had any recent mod actions where
they're like, okay, this makes sense.
Where you've provided a deliberately false translation. Because if it turns out that a player sees that who does speak Japanese, they'll report that as an abuse report, saying, hey, this thing says one thing in English, but it's quite actually offensive in Japanese.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Is there also, because I noticed when I upload decals, I have a lot of decals. So the way I save my file names is like huge strings of like, well, in this instance, like Tokyo Bike Storage logo 2 or something, like with no spaces in between. But I've noticed that whenever I upload a decal and I just leave the name, when it's like one huge string, it tends to like be rejected more than whenever I change the title to like a simple name like logo or Tokyo or bike. That tends to do better. Is that my imagination, or?
I'd have to look at the specific examples. I'm not. There's no intrinsic technical reason why that would happen.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
One of the things that I would actually recommend to everyone is if you can provide as much context as you're uploading your image, do that, right? Because the thing you just mentioned as well about a Japanese text is like, it doesn't hurt for you to provide that level of context in the title of the image or the mesh what you're trying to upload. It will actually sometimes be very, very helpful. So just leaving it as a file name might actually hurt you because the file name might be something that's not, that let's say it's R-rated, but the image itself is not.
Yeah.
It might actually hurt you. So please try to provide as much context as you can.
Yeah.
Would it then be better to not just have a title and just have like a way to add like a description to it? It feels a little bit hacky to like put that in the title of a decal.
No, I hear you. Yes,
Yeah.
but at least it's a way to communicate
It
back.
is, yeah.
The other thing that goes on is we do get people trying to bot us, and oftentimes bots send in gibberish file names. So if you're sending in something that looks like a hash key or something as the file name, someone may say, "Hey, is this actually a human? Would a human make a file name like that?"
I see. All right, thank you.
Right. Yeah. All right. So
And I'm sorry, I'm getting we are done. Time is out.
All right, I'm around.
Thank you all
so
very
Come
much.
find me if you want. Thank you.
So we're going to talk about game ratings here in about 6 or 7 minutes.